Hello, and welcome to day 3 of our 10th annual Digital Console Expo presented by TC Furlong. I'm Brian Gran with the TC Furlong sales and marketing team. So happy that everyone can be with us here today. We had initially designed the Digital Console Expo as a chance for our customers to learn more about digital consoles outside of the big trade shows. And it's usually an in-person event hosted at the Moody Church, but we're very excited to be hosting this live as a virtual event for you today. So this is day 3, the final day of our 3-day event. And in case you missed days 1 and 2, recordings of those main sessions will be available on our YouTube page here shortly. We'll make sure to send out a link in the email. So in case this is your first day here, welcome. I'll help explain the format a little bit. So each morning we have our main session that you're in right now, which is going to be a combination of some pre-recorded presentations from manufacturers, followed up with some live discussion. In the afternoon, we have our breakout Q&A events, and these are a time for small group discussion directly with manufacturers. We hope to design this as if you were entering into a manufacturer's booth on a trade show floor. You can sign up for all our breakout Q&A sessions this afternoon with Waves and DiGiCo at the digitalconsoleexpo.com website. We've also got some deep dive webinars. Our final deep dive tonight is with Allen Heath for the SQ series. Again, you can sign up for that webinar at the digitalconsoleexpo.com website. Now, we've seen a lot of familiar faces over the last 2 days here. And for those that are not familiar, I'll tell you a little bit about TC Furlong. We're a live sound company that was established in 1973, nearly 50 years ago. And while based in the Chicago area, we service clients all across the Midwest region and the country. We handle equipment sales and rentals, live event production, and a handful of services, including loudspeaker design, system design and alignment, RF coordination, and repairs. Now, today we've got some great presentations from Waves and DiGiCo, so happy that everyone can be here with us today. Now, make sure you stick around to the end of each presentation. That's when we'll be doing our giveaways with the manufacturer, and we'll have a lot of really cool items, including a plug-in bundle from Waves and some cool utility bags from DiGiCo. All right, so I think we're ready. We're going to kick it off with our first presentation here from Waves.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this presentation. My name is Jeremiah Clever, and I am the East Coast Product Specialist for Waves Live. Many of you may be familiar with Waves products, as we have been creating industry-leading processing tools for over 25 years. And Waves Live was launched to bring those same processing tools that were created for the studio industry to live sound engineers for front-of-house, monitors, and broadcast applications. And the backbone of this is the SoundGrid Audio over Ethernet protocol, which allows you to connect multiple compatible devices over a standard gigabit Ethernet network for both processing and transporting audio in ultra-low latency. Now, every SoundGrid system contains the same core components. The first component is a host computer running a SoundGrid host application. This is your user interface. The second component is a SoundGrid server. This is the main DSP engine, which handles all of the processing for the plugins you're running. This keeps the heavy workloads off your host computer and ensures ultra-low latency. The third component is a SoundGrid compatible I/O device. This is how we get audio in and out of a SoundGrid system. The fourth component is a SoundGrid compatible gigabit network switch. SoundGrid supports up to 4 switches and a star configuration to connect all of your system components. These are non-proprietary switches, but you do want to ensure that your switch is approved by Waves. Now, the only thing that might change between one setup or the other is the format of I/O that you're using and the host application. And today, we're going to look at 2 different host applications that allow you to run your favorite Waves plugins for your live show, Super Rack and the Emotion LV1 mixer. Super Rack is a plugin host application that allows you to run up to 64 mono or multi-channel processing racks with almost any digital console. Many of the consoles that you'll see from other manufacturers here at this expo offer SoundGrid compatibility, either through optional SoundGrid expansion cards or through standardized formats like Dante or MADI. Think of Super Rack as a virtual external effects rack for your console. Audio is sent from the console, usually via a channel insert, into the SoundGrid network, where it's processed in Super Rack and then returned to the console, insert returns. LV1, on the other hand, is a complete live mixing solution, available as a 16, 32, or 64 channel mixer, with up to 24 stereo auxiliary buses, 8 stereo mix groups, an 8x12 matrix mixer, and 16 DCAs. LV1 offers powerful scalability and superior sound quality in an easy-to-use, intuitive user interface. First, let's take a look at a SoundGrid setup with Super Rack. So this is the starting point for setting up Super Rack with our console. And at this point, we've already made our physical connections. We've already connected our I/O to a network switch along with our host computer and our SoundGrid server. So now we need to configure those devices in our Super Rack session. I'm going to come over here to I/O devices and click Add. I'm going to go to Network Devices, and this shows me a list of everything that's currently connected to my SoundGrid network switch. So I'm going to choose the MGB, which is a MADI interface for SoundGrid. So this is going to replicate a scenario where I've got a MADI-enabled console. And a couple things here, it shows me that I'm currently using an internal clock source on that device. We're at 48K, and the M indicates that it's the master clock for the SoundGrid network. So if I want to change any of that, I can click this settings icon, and that's going to launch my control panel for that device. And then I can choose a different clock source. Say if I want to have that device slave clock from the console itself, I would choose digital, could change the sample rate, things like that. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is add my SoundGrid server. So I'm going to come over to the servers column and click add. And you can see I've got 2 servers on my network here. So I'm going to choose the first one. That's going to populate there. So that, again, is my dedicated DSP engine. Now, if I want to add a second server, that's going to act as a redundant engine. So if I add the second one here, you can see it says RSGS. That means redundant SoundGrid server. So now if anything happens to my primary server, it's going to automatically fail over to my backup. Now I can also configure a controller here. So say if I wanted to use a MIDI controller to control plugin parameters or snapshots, I can choose a MIDI controller and set that up. Or if I'm a DiGiCo user, we do offer a console remote with DiGiCo SD series consoles. So that allows you to sync up your snapshots and your session files with the console. And it also allows you to control plugin parameters from the console touch and term. So that's a great option if you're a DiGiCo user. The other thing I need to do is tell Super Rack what kind of configuration I want to use. So this gives me the option of 4, 8, 16, 32, or 64 racks. You do want to choose the appropriate amount of racks just to make sure you're not using any unnecessary DSP on the network. So let's say for this example, I do need 64 racks. I'm going to choose the 64 rack configuration, give that a second to load. And now we're all set. So I'm going to jump over to my overview here. And if you look across the top, we have 6 tabs, and this is how we navigate Super Rack. So we've got overview 1 and 2. We've got our rack view, show, patch, and then again, our setup. And any one of these 6 tabs, you can tear off and make its own screen. So say if you had multiple screens, you could set up a custom workflow up to 4 screens. So looking back at overview 1, on the left-hand side, we have our rack navigation pane. So we can select banks of racks, 1 through 16, 17 through 32, and so on. Or we can see an overview of all of our racks simultaneously. In each of our 2 overview windows, we also have 4 custom pages. So this allows us to build custom banks from any of our racks, anywhere in our session. And we can reorder these just by dragging and dropping. And you can do this on the fly. It doesn't affect audio for your session at all. So you have a total of 8 custom banks between your 2 overviews. Now at the top of each rack, you can see you've got the option to name your racks, and you can just name these corresponding to the channels that you're sending to them from your console. So I just named a few here already. I've got kick, snare, keys, and vocal. And just below that, we have our input selection. So if I click the drop-down menu here, it's going to give me the option to choose mono, stereo, 5.0, 5.1, or 7.1 inputs. And then it's going to show me a list of all the connections that I currently have. So I've got the MGB. I'm going to choose MADI 1, and this is just going to correspond to the patch point that I've done on the insert from the console. And it's going to automatically patch my output for me down here at the bottom to the corresponding output. Now, let's say if I wanted to do a stereo channel, I would select a stereo input, and it's going to do the same thing. It's going to select the corresponding stereo output for me down here at the bottom. Now I can also do upmixing by selecting, let's say if this was a reverb send or something like that, I could select a mono input and then come down and choose a stereo output. And so now I've got a mono in with the stereo out for upmixing. Now, in the midsection here, I've got 8 insert points, and that's where I can actually instantiate my processing for any one of these racks. So let's say, for example, on my kick, I wanted to run we'll say an SSL channel. So now I've got an SSL channel strip for my drums. Let's say maybe on my vocal, I wanted to do some pitch correction. So I can come in here and go to my pitch shift and choose waves tune real time. And now I can do real time pitch correction for my vocal. Now what we're looking at here, we switched over to the rack view. This shows us the plugin user interface in focus. So if we had multiple plugins here, I'm just going to instantiate a couple other things real quick, maybe an API compressor. So this is where we can just toggle through our plugin interfaces. And you can actually pop these out and tack them to the work surface to make them their own windows as well. So now wherever I go, I've always got that plugin in focus. Now, if I click the drop down over here in the rack on any of the plugins, it's going to show me some important information. It shows me the latency of that individual plugin. So this has 0 samples of latency. It also shows me the total rack latency, which is also 0 samples at this point. Now, over on the right-hand side, I've got 2 user panes. I've got my hot plugins and my user keys. And I can set any plugin that I want to a hot plugin just by coming down here. I'm going to set that to hot plugin 1. Now, no matter where I go, I've got a quick access to bring that plugin into focus just by clicking in my hot plugins window. And I can also pop this window out and move it to anywhere on the work surface that I like. My user keys, I've got 16 user keys, and I can assign those to any functions like recalling different snapshots or bypassing plugins, things of that nature. Now, the next tab over is my show tab. This is where I can save my session file and create snapshots. You get up to 1,000 snapshots within your session file. And your snapshots have a full comprehensive scope, so you can select what parameters you want to be included or excluded from that specific snapshot. And you can also recall safe any parameters within your session so that it's not overridden by a snapshot when you recall that. Finally, we've got our patch tab. This gives us the ability to do device-to-device routing. So say if I added an additional device here in my inventory, I can choose, I'll choose the DAW for my Axis 1. So this is a SoundGrid driver running on another computer. Let's say I want to use that for multi-track recording and virtual sound check. So I can add that to the inventory. Now, if I look at my patch bay, I can route directly between my MGB and my Axis 1. So that kind of acts as a digital split and allows me to do multi-track recording or any other kind of auxiliary function from my SoundGrid network. My latency groups allow me to time align any group of channels in my Super Rack session to make sure that they return to the console with the same latency that they left, or the same phase relationship that they left the console with. So say you spend a lot of time getting your snare top and bottom mics in phase, you patch them through Super Rack. And then the 2 different racks that you're doing maybe have different latency just because you're using different plugins. So we can actually choose to keep those time aligned based on the longest path of those 2 channels. And then our link groups allow us to just link any common parameters from channels that we assign to the group. So our input trim, our A, B input selection, things like that will all be linked automatically. So that's a pretty basic overview of the workflow and the setup of Super Rack. Again, this is basically acting as a virtual outboard effects rack for your console and really opens you up to use a lot of processing that's not available in most standard consoles. So now I want to introduce you to the Emotion LV1 mixer. LV1 is a revolutionary software-based mixer that gives you ultimate system flexibility and scalability through a modular design. But what exactly is a software mixer? So to give you a better idea, let's take a look at both how LV1 is similar to a traditional console and what makes it unique. First, just like any digital console, LV1 runs on a computer with an operating system. Traditional consoles have these built into the surface and typically run the OS in the background. LV1 allows you to use any Mac or PC to run your console. You can even move your console license between multiple machines. LV1 also has a dedicated DSP engine, the SoundGrid server, which is independent from the host computer. This dedicated piece of hardware handles all the mixer's processing and mix engine performance, which means your host computer is not an audio fail point. Traditional consoles are built into dedicated control surfaces with physical faders, rotary controls, and function keys. These control surfaces are essentially the mouse of the mixer's software layer. LV1's main control surface is the software GUI itself, which can be controlled in a variety of ways. Touchscreens give users quick and intuitive access to every mixer parameter and setting. You can use up to 4 touchscreens with your LV1 mixer, and your screen layout can be customized to fit your workflow. For tactile control of LV1, add any MIDI or MCU control surface. Waves even offers a dedicated tactile control surface fully integrated with the LV1 software called Fit. Combine touchscreens with a hardware controller for the ultimate user experience that is both portable and cost-effective. Most consoles offer various options of stage boxes, some of which use proprietary audio formats, while others use standardized formats like Dante or MADI. LV1 allows you to connect to any SoundGrid-compatible I/O device, which is open to many third-party hardware manufacturers. This gives you a variety of options in both audio format and sonic character. And you can have up to 16 I/O devices connected to an LV1 system for expansion. There are even devices available to connect your LV1 system to other standardized formats like Dante, MADI, and AVB. For larger systems with more than one console, I/Os can be shared between mix positions, digitally splitting the input signal. This feature includes gain tracking, giving independent control of gain structure to each mix position. Finally, LV1 is equipped with all the common functions, routing, and mix capabilities you would expect from any digital console. Custom user fader banks and function keys, snapshots with scope and recall safe, and multi-track recording and virtual soundcheck capabilities. Connect LV1 to any core audio or ASIO compliant DAW using the free 128-channel SoundGrid driver. This allows you to stream multi-channel audio from any computer source directly into the LV1 mixer with no physical hardware. Only an Ethernet connection is needed. But the real strength of LV1 is having Wave's superior audio processing tools available at ultra-low latency right in your mixer, allowing you to create studio-quality mixes for your live show or broadcast. So now let's look at LV1 in a little more detail. So just like with Super Rack, the system inventory window is our starting point for configuring our LV1 system. So I'm going to start by adding our I/O devices. So I'm going to go to Rack A. You can see I've got Rack A and Rack B. There's no difference between these really. It's just a way to keep things organized. So I'm going to start in Rack A at device slot 1. I'm going to add a network device, and I'm going to choose the STG2412, which is a 24-in, 12-out stage box. And right off the bat, again, you can see that it shows that this is internal clock source at 48K, and the M indicates that it's the master clock. Now, I've got 16 device slots here between Rack A and Rack B, so that gives me a lot of room for expanding my LV1 system. So I'm going to come to device slot 2 and go back to network devices. I'm just going to add these other 2 devices that I have here. I've got my iOS, and I've also got my MGB. Now you can see when these come online, they say SOE, meaning sync over Ethernet. So they're deriving their clock source over the SoundGrid network from the STG2412. Now again, with these 16 device slots, we have a lot of room for expansion, and there's plenty of third-party manufacturers that create SoundGrid-compatible I/O devices. And the cool thing about LV1 is that the drivers for all these devices are already built into the software. So if I come to device slot 4 and click Add a Device and go to my offline devices, this shows me a complete list of all the drivers that are already installed for other devices with LV1. So this gives me the ability to configure these into my session file, even if I don't have them physically connected. So I'm going to choose this HearTech SoundGrid bridge, which is a Dante to SoundGrid device that gives me 64 channels between Dante and SoundGrid. And you can see it shows up as offline, meaning that it's not physically connected, but I can still patch it and route to and from it in my session file. So when I do have that device connected, it'll automatically assume those patches. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is add a SoundGrid driver for multi-track recording and virtual sound check. So if I come to Rack B, go to network devices, I've got my DAW, Axis 1. This is a second computer that I have connected to my SoundGrid network switch, and it shows up in my inventory and now allows me to route to and from a DAW directly into my LV1 session. The next thing I'm going to do is add my SoundGrid server. So if I click Add a Device under the Servers column, you can see I've got 2 Extreme servers here. So I'm going to add the first, and that's going to become my primary DSP engine. And I'm going to come to Device Slot 2 and add the second server as a redundant engine. So again, if anything happens to my primary server, LV1 will automatically fail over to the backup. Now for tactile control of LV1, Waves supports both MCU and MIDI control protocols. We also have the MIDI plus Fit controller, which Waves designed from the ground up to fully integrate with the LV1 software. So to add a controller, we'll come to the Controls column, click Add a Device. I'm going to choose MIDI plus Fit. I'm also going to open the control settings panel to configure this to work with the LV1 software by assigning it to our input and output control ports. Once I have that assigned, I can choose if I want my controller to follow either of my 2 on-screen mixers, Mixer 1 or Mixer 2, or I can set it to be a standalone controller, making it operate independently of either of my 2 on-screen mixers. So now that I have all my devices configured, I'm going to jump over to my patch bay and actually patch them to and from the mixer. So you can see here, I've got all of the devices that I assigned to my SoundGrid inventory available in the patch bay, including the offline device. And I can just select which ones I want to see in the patch bay at any given time. So I'm going to start with my input patch. And you can see here, I've got a selectable A and B input for each of my input channels. So my A input, I want to patch those to come from my STG24 stage box. We'll start up here at channel 1 and just patch those in really quickly. Now my B input, I want to use that for my virtual sound check coming from my Axis 1, which is my DAW. So I'm going to choose the B input, highlight the Axis 1, and then assign those to come from my DAW playback. Now, the other thing I'm going to patch while I'm here in the patch bay are my outputs. So if I go to the output tab, I've got my direct outs and my mix bus outs here. So I want my mix bus outs. I'm going to choose main left right bus, and I want those to go to outputs 1 and 2 on the STG2412. So there we go. So now I'm going to navigate over to the mixer. And again, we navigate LV1 with these tabs across the top. So we've got Mixer 1, Mixer 2, our channel overview, our show file, and then again, our patch bay and setup tab. Now, any one of these tabs we can tear off and move to its own window. And with LV1, we have up to 4 screens that we can configure with any layout that we desire. So starting with Mixer 1 here, on the right-hand side, we have our channel banks that just let us navigate through our channels. Currently, I have LV1 set up as a 64-channel mixer. Now, the thing with LV1 is all of our channels can be mono or stereo. So I can flip any of my input channels to stereo, which gives me up to 128 assignable input patches. Now, below my input patch, I've got my group and effects buses. So I've got 8 stereo groups, and then I've got 8 effects returns. And again, my effects returns can also be mono or stereo. Below that, I've got my 16 monitor channels, which can also be mono or stereo. Below that, I've got my masters page. So I've got my main left right bus, along with my center and mono buses, my cue and talkback channels. And then I have 8 matrices. Each matrix is outfitted with a 12 input mixer, and we can assign those inputs from any channel, group, auxiliary bus, or main. Below my masters page, I've got my link and DCA pages, followed by an overview of the entire console. Now, in addition to my factory pages, I also have 8 user custom banks in each of my 2 mix windows. So I have 16 total user custom banks. And these can be populated from anything in the mixer, any input, group channel, auxiliary bus, main, DCA, whatever. And we can reorder these channel strips just by dragging and dropping however we like. We can do this on the fly. It doesn't affect audio in LV1 at all. So jumping back to my factory pages, if I look here underneath where it says modes, I have the ability to select different views for my mixer. So the first one up here is my input, and this shows me all of my preamp control, phantom power control for each of my assigned inputs. Below that, I've got my plugin rack. So I've got 8 insert points for running plugins on all of my channels. The default channel strip is the Emo series plugins, which gives us a high and low pass filter, a dynamic suite, and a 4-band parametric EQ. Below that, I've got overview of my dynamics and EQ filters. I've got my effects sends, followed by my monitor sends 1 through 8, and then monitor sends 9 through 16. Then I also have my routing view and my channel overview. Now, if we want to see a little bit more detail about our channel, we can go to the channel tab. Now, the channel overview is going to follow the channel selection in the mix window itself. So you can see in the upper left-hand corner what channel is selected. Now, as I select different channels on my hardware controller, the channel overview automatically follows that. Now, the things that it shows me here in the upper left-hand corner, I've got my input selection, I've got my gain control. On the right-hand side, I've got my auxiliary sends. So I've got my effects and monitor sends 1 through 8, 9 through 16. Then I've got my output assignments, my channel fader, and then my DCA and mute group assignments. But the main thing in the channel overview is my rack and my plugin overview. Now, again, by default, I've got the Emo series plugins as my default channel strip, which includes the F2 high and low pass filters. I've got the D5 dynamic suite and the Q4 parametric EQ. All of these are available from the main channel overview as well. Let's say, for example, maybe this is a vocal channel. We want to do some additional processing. Maybe we want to do some real-time pitch correction. We can do that just by inserting Waves Tune real-time directly in our plugin rack. Now, Waves gives you a complete list of factory presets that give you a nice starting point for different types of channels, and you can create your own user presets. So I've got one here called Omni, and in this one, instead of using the Emo series plugins, I'm using the Sheps Omni channel as my channel strip, and that gives me EQ, compression, gate, de-essing, all in one plugin. Let's say maybe this is on a kick or a snare. We can do some additional processing. Let's say, for example, we wanted to do smack attack. This allows us to do some transient shaping and enhance the attack of our drums. Or perhaps we want to do some correction on our drums. We could do torque. The torque allows us to do pitch correction or repitching the fundamental of the head of the drum. And this can be either a creative effect or something that you do correctively for a drum that just doesn't sound very good. The point is, you have the full arsenal of Waves plugins that you own available to you directly in your mixer for your live show. So this just gives you a huge amount of processing capabilities that isn't available in most standard consoles. So that should give you a pretty good base understanding of what SoundGrid is and how it's used in today's live sound environments. You've got Super Rack, which allows you to run Waves processing with your existing digital console, and Emotion LV1, which is a complete live mixing solution. Now, either of these applications can be used to greatly enhance your mixes for front of house, monitors, or broadcast applications. I hope you found this information useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the breakout sessions later today to answer some of your questions. Thanks again for watching. Cheers.
Now, next up, we're joined by Waves Live product specialist, Jeremiah Clever. Hey, Jeremiah, how are you today?
Hey, man. How are you guys?
We're doing great. So happy that you and Waves could be joining us here today for the Digital Console Expo.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for doing this virtually. This is cool.
Great. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about the Emotion LV1 a little bit more. Can you tell me some of the form factors that are available or bundles with LV1 system these days?
Yeah, so I think form factor is typically one of the biggest questions about LV1 because it's not an all-in-one console that comes in a box that you just open and there it is. So it's a little bit more of a modular system. So you see a lot of guys using touchscreens or a combination of touchscreens and controllers. And there's really a lot of different ways that you can configure that. So I've got a system here that is just a laptop with an I/O connected over a network switch. And I've got a touchscreen on the laptop. I've got the system over my shoulder here, which is 2 touch screens, and I also have a physical controller connected to that one. And we've partnered with a couple different case manufacturers like OCD Labs and Circle 3 Designs to kind of develop some different flight case type solutions. The one that I have here with me is an OCD Labs design, and it mounts the 2 touch screens there. They also have an option that mounts 1 touch screen with the fit controller. So it can really be any kind of form factor that you want. And that's kind of the beauty of it, is it can be a very small footprint that you can travel with if you're doing fly dates and stuff like that, or you can really expand it out if you're doing more of an install type situation.
Oh, that's great. I know, especially for fly dates, getting as small as possible is great. Now, for Waves Live, what are the use cases for this? Is this for a house of worship, or is this for corporate events, or tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really all of the above. This year, we've seen a ton of churches using this as a streaming solution. Given the modularity and expandability of the I/O formats, it makes it really easy to integrate with existing infrastructure. So if you're looking for a way to add a second mix position dedicated for your online streaming, this is a really cost-effective way to do it. That gives you, really high quality audio and, near endless amounts of processing capabilities, so you can really tailor your mix for an online streamed audience. This has been great for corporate events, guys who just need to have a very small footprint, but have things like Dugan Auto Mixer and noise reduction and those kind of mic management tools available for them. We see it used a lot for touring. There was a clip in the video, I don't know if you saw, but there's Will Madera, who is Pitbull's front of house engineer. They've been touring with LV1 as their main rig for several years. We've got artists like Jeff Sandstrom, who's been doing Christian artists like Lauren Daigle with his LV1 system. So you see a lot of it in all these different applications. And I think it kind of has its place in each of those.
No, that's great. And we can talk a little bit more about the Fit control surface. That's something that was just announced this year. Is that correct?
Yeah. Fit's been out for maybe 3 months now or so. And I think it's been a huge addition to the product line. Before the Fit controller, LV1's always been open to third-party control surface. So like if you had a Behringer X-Touch or something like that, you could use it with LV1. And you can still do that also. But the Fit is cool because it's designed to integrate with the LV1 software from the ground up. So it gives you nice tactile control. It's very intuitive and nice small footprint. And it's built to feel like a console. This isn't a cheap controller or anything like that. This feels like, it's got great faders. It's going to be roadworthy. It can be rack mounted in case you want to travel with it. So I think it's been a welcomed addition to the product line for sure.
Oh, that's great. So let's chat a little bit about SoundGrid and integration with other console manufacturers as well. I know that's a big part for Waves SoundGrid.
Yeah, that's kind of where it started, going back to the old Avid days with the venue line. Waves products kind of integrated natively on that just because it was using the same format as Pro Tools systems. So that really kind of opened the door for Waves to step into the live market and start developing plugins specifically for live sound. And that's been a huge part of what Waves does now. And that kind of led to the development of the SoundGrid platform, which now enables us to interface Waves plugins with almost every digital console on the market. And most consoles have a dedicated Waves I/O card available from the manufacturer. Waves distributes a couple of these, for Yamaha and Behringer and Midas, I guess. And so that really enables you to have that same level of processing with any console that you're using. So, even if you're not on an LV1 system, if you're using a DiGiCo or an Allen Heath or whatever, you still have the ability to put Waves processing with those consoles. And kind of beyond just doing the processing, SoundGrid is also giving you that kind of audio over Ethernet connectivity for other applications like multi-track recording, virtual sound check, streaming audio directly into software applications. So if you're doing a broadcast stream through OBS or things like that, you can use the SoundGrid driver as a virtual connection between your hardware and your virtual point. So there's a ton of applications for SoundGrid out there. I think it's a great platform. And it's really open to most hardware manufacturers at this point.
Well, that's great. So before we get into the giveaway, I want to remind everyone here to sign up for the breakout Q&A sessions with Jeremiah later today. All of those registrations can be found at the digitalconsoleexpo.com website. Feel free to bring your questions there, whether about SoundGrid or about eMotion LV1. All right, so we do have a really cool giveaway here. Jeremiah, can you tell us what we'll be giving away this morning?
Yeah, so I think we're doing a Waves Gold Bundle The Gold bundle has over 40 plugins in it. It's kind of long been one of the go-to industry standard bundles. And Waves plugins, when you have a Waves bundle, it's going to work in any platform that you own. So that can be running in a DAW, it could be running on the SoundGrid with your console or in an LV1 system. So and I think this normally goes for a couple $100 or so. So yeah, we're excited to give it away.
That's great. We really appreciate it. So I'm being told here that our winner today for the Gold bundle is going to be John Cobble. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, from Columbus, Ohio. So congratulations, John. We'll be getting in touch with you with the email that you provided in your registration, and we'll make sure you get registered with that Gold bundle.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeremiah. We'll be seeing you later in the breakout sessions.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
All right. So next up, to introduce our next manufacturer, we're going to go to Aaron Posega with the TC Furlong Sales and Marketing team. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, Brian, thank you. And thank you again to Jeremiah and Waves for that presentation. And of course, thank you to all of you who are joining us here this morning. If you're just tuning in, this is day 3 of our virtual Digital Console Expo. This is our final day of the Expo this year. Just want to remind everybody that this main session this morning is not the end of the Console Expo. We do have some more events coming up this afternoon, starting with Q&A sessions with each of the manufacturers that are presenting here this morning. So DiGiCo and Waves will both have 4 half-hour Q&A sessions starting at 1 p.m. Central Time. Again, you can sign up for those sessions at digitalconsoleexpo.com. And then finally, wrapping everything up, our final event of the Expo this year will be one last deep dive webinar session with Allen Heath going over the SQ line of consoles. And again, sign up for all of that is available at digitalconsoleexpo.com. Now, I want to make sure that if you're tuning in, you don't miss anything. We've had a lot of great content, a lot of great presentations over the last few days. So we have been recording these main session presentations as well as the deep dive sessions for our YouTube channel. So you can follow us on YouTube to be updated when those go live. Or of course, keep an eye out on your email. We'll be sending out an email. So if you want to review anything, or if you missed any of the presentations, you'll be able to go back and see all of those. While you're at it, I would encourage you to check us out on all of our social media channels. We are on all of the usual suspects. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Just search for TC Furlong Inc. on all of those platforms to follow us. You can follow those accounts for updates on more great events like this one, educational content, some behind the scenes looks at live events that we work on, and a whole bunch of other great stuff. So I would encourage you to go check that out as well. With that, I think we're ready to move on to our final main session presentation. So let's hear from DiGiCo.
Hi, my name is Ryan Shelton. I work with Group Unlimited, who's a distributor for DiGiCo here in the US. They distribute a lot of other brands, including Blue Sky, Calrec, Klang, XT8 MC2, and most recently SSL. All right, our first workshop, we're going to discuss digital consoles, how some digital consoles are designed to simply be a digital version of an analog console, and how some consoles are designed to be part of larger systems. We're also going to talk about how DiGiCo can make it easier for your church or organization as it grows. The goal of this workshop is to give you an overview of the DiGiCo ecosystem, briefly show you the hardware, and show you how you can configure these systems to specifically fit your needs as you grow. All right, a little bit about DiGiCo real quick. DiGiCo is based in the UK. They were actually founded in 2002 with the launch of the DiGiCo D5 Live. Coincidentally, we still have quite a few in operation around the world. All right, so they're based in the UK and they actually manufacture, test, and do all the things with the consoles in Scotland. This is kind of an amazing thing. It's a rarity these days as well. And that is one of the things that we love about DiGiCo is just the quality and the support and the passion they bring behind these products. Speaking of passion and heritage, they actually go back to an analog console manufacturer called Soundtrax. That was also a UK company. That's actually what DiGiCo came out of. A lot of the R&D staff transitioned from Soundtrax to DiGiCo when they started DiGiCo in 2002. But Soundtrax actually started back in the late 70s making analog consoles. They've grown a lot since then. They made recording, broadcast, and live consoles, and they started some of the first digital consoles back in the late 80s, as I like to say, before it was cool. All right, the purpose of DiGiCo is to design consoles that are well thought out for every mixing application and designed for the art and science of sound engineering. This means whether you're doing live, whether you're doing touring, church or house of worship, whether you're doing broadcast or whether you're doing theater, that's what these consoles are designed for. They are not a recording console. They are not meant to be put in a studio. They can handle some of those tasks, mainly multi-track recording, virtual sound check, things like that. They can handle those functions, but they are designed for live mixing applications. They're also designed for the sound professional. Now, before you think maybe this isn't for you, keep in mind that professionals need reliability, flexibility, and speed. They need to be able to get around the product quickly. And that doesn't just mean they know it well. That means that everything is logical. It's also optimized. So we know how you're going to use this. And to be honest, we actually cheat a little bit at this. And we have a network of engineers that we reach out to as we implement new products and new functions. And back to when we first built this software to make sure that we're not putting in any unnecessary steps, any unnecessary menus or options. We're trying to keep this as streamlined as possible to make it fast and easy and functional for you. All right, let's talk about some of the common features you're going to see across our product range. The first and foremost is premium sound quality. This is of huge importance to us. We don't have time today to go through everything, but I just want to hit on one thing: floating point processing. This is huge for us. So we use 40-bit floating point processing across our entire product range. That is very important because it is the most natural, high-definition way to process large amounts of audio channels and to sum them together. Now, you'll all see a huge difference between our platform and a number of other manufacturers that use fixed-point processing. Fixed-point processing is a more affordable way of doing things, but as you start adding more channels or you start demanding more of your console, you're going to hear that things may sound squished or just not as detailed, flatter. That's often common things that we hear from our users. You're also going to see that we have a logical software workflow. As mentioned before, we work with engineers to optimize our user interface or graphical user interface, or typically called a GUI. And this means that we are limiting the number of pages you're getting to. We're also trying to give you an overview and direct access to the controls you're going to need. You're also going to see that our physical consoles have an ergonomic and flexible layout. This means that the console is never wider than you can actually reach. You don't have to slide your chair back and forth to reach the different sections of the console. The faders are very comfortable position. The screens are close where you can reach them. The encoders are all in a very logical and ergonomic layouts. This takes a lot of experience. We've designed a lot of consoles over the years. Also, one of the main things we're going to focus on today is scalable architecture. What this means is that you can invest in a console and a stage rack now, and then as you grow, as that facility or room grows, you can actually add on more stage boxes or more consoles, and I'll go into this more detail in a minute. Lastly, we're going to talk about return on investment. This is something I feel is very unique to DiGiCo. Just to give you an example, we launched the SD9 back in late 2009. When that console was launched, it was a 40 input, 16 bus or 16 aux console. It later went to a 48 input, 24 aux console, and then now today, not only is it fully supported by our software updates, it is a 96 input, 48 aux console. This is a huge investment and a huge change just for you owning the same hardware. If you bought that original console in 2009, just through software updates, no hardware, you would be up to that 96 input channels right now. So that is something that I feel that we offer and value that we offer our users. All right, let's talk about what is a console and what is a system. And I'm going to start with the usual. I'm going to start with our analog consoles because that's usually where everything started. So here we have a stage with microphone inputs, and those are wired back to an analog console. You probably have rooms or facilities throughout your campus that are just like this today. So you have an analog console, XLR connections on the back of it. You may go through an analog snake to go up to the stage, maybe floor plates, floor pockets, or wall plates, depending upon who integrated your system. All right, so a digital console, when they first came out, were simply designed to replace that analog console. Use all your existing analog infrastructure, and this is how a lot of them are made today. All right, more recently, you've seen digital stage boxes. Some of them actually have the DSP inside of these, but more commonly, the DSP is inside of the console, and the stage box is just that, a stage box. And then we simply connect those lines on the stage, whether that's floor pockets, wall plates, or directly to the stage box. And that stage box connects to the digital console via Cat5e or Cat6 lines. It may be coax, it may be fiber, depending upon the infrastructure. This makes it very easy to install into retrofit installations because it's a very simple cabling run from the digital console to the equipment room or to the stage. Now, as far as a system goes, this is what I'm trying to talk about today. A system is not just a digital console and a stage box. When you grow and add more microphone inputs, you need more stage boxes. Then you can add these later over time. And as you add more inputs and you need more stage boxes, you can add more I/O over time. And to truly make it a system, we need to be able to add another console to this setup. So maybe right now you're focusing on a broadcast or a streaming mix, and you would like to easily add in a console that can see all the I/O from the stage, that maybe as a mic pre gets changed by the person at front of house, can be automatically compensated at that broadcast position, have its own DSP, and set up an optimum mix for the stream. So that's what I'm talking about by a system. Something we can add to over time, add more consoles, and you know what? Let's throw in a monitor console. So now we can actually mix for the people up on stage. Maybe we don't want them fooling with Avion mixers while they're supposed to be performing. All right, now more commonly, you're actually going to see this connected up via a Cat5e or Cat6 switch and Cat6 cabling, all to a similar switch. That would be something like Dante, which is quite popular today. All right, now we have some terminology out of the way and we have some common understanding. Let's talk about the DiGiCo ecosystem. We're actually going to do this through a series of system examples. This is example number 1, and this is going to be based on the DiGiCo S series and Dante as an infrastructure. Quick overview on Dante. Dante is an Ethernet-based IT digital audio networking protocol, commonly called AV over IP, so audio video over IP infrastructure. So that means we can take standard Cat6 cabling, standard Ethernet gigabit switches, and we can connect all the devices together in what we would call a star configuration. So I/O boxes on stage go to the switch, the console goes to the switch, everything talks to each other, and we set everything up and we route via software. All right, so now that we have an overview over Dante, let's build a system out. So first I want to introduce you to the S31. The S31 is part of the S series family. There's an S31 and an S21. The 21 has less faders and 2 screens, and the S31 has 3 screens and more faders. Same DSP availability between them, just one's a more smaller and compact console. So the S31 has 48 Flexi inputs, and it has 16 Flexi buses. A bus, remember, is an aux or group, and you define how those are set up. Flexi means that any channel or any bus can be mono or stereo. So as an example, if I needed a stereo input for my music playback at front of house, I would plug my computer to play back 2 channels of audio into my console, so 2 mic pre's, but then I'd go to 1 channel on my console and make it stereo. That 1 stereo channel is going to look at 2 mic pre's, but it is taking up 1 channel, and all 48 channels can do this. That means I could have 48 stereo channels if I truly needed it. All right, same thing with the buses. If I set up a mono wedge mix for a musician, we later move to mono ears, and then we decide to get stereo ears, I would simply go to that aux and change it to stereo. I would need 2 outputs from the system, and obviously my stereo in-ears would need to be able to accommodate that, but the console will easily be able to handle that. All right, you're going to also see 31 motorized touch-sensitive faders. You're going to see RGB backlit touch-sensitive encoders. What this means is we have an LED ring that can change colors around every encoder. So as we select a parameter like mic pre's or auxes to control on the console, the encoders will actually change color. You're going to see this from Kyle later on as he's taking you through this console. We also have virtual on-screen macros. Macros are a lot like launching an app on your smartphone. They do a bunch of common commands for you, and it looks like an app on your smartphone. So this is an on-screen button that you press that can do things like save your session, update a snapshot, maybe tab tempo, or something as complicated as move every input into virtual sound check mode and back. All right, you're also going to see that we have 3 capacitive multi-touch high-res displays. These are beautiful, very easy to view and very easy to control. It's a lot like interfacing with an iPad or a tablet. All right, let's show you the back of the console so you can see how some of the I/O is on this and how we're going to connect in the system we're going to build up. So first things first, you're going to see that we have 24 mic pre's on board. These are completely flexible and completely routable to any channel anywhere in the system. And they're also continually available even if you're using the other methods of connection to like audio stage boxes. We also have 12 analog line outputs. And then you're going to see we have 2 DiGiCo multi-channel interface card slots. We commonly refer to these as DMI slots. These are each 64 by 64 channels at 48 or 96K. That means with these 2 card slots, we can have 128 channels in and 128 channels out if we needed to. That is not counting the already 24 mic pre's and 12 analog outputs that we have. Everything is fully routable and flexible wherever you need it to go at any time and can be recallable via our snapshot system. You'll also see that we have a 48 by 48 channel USB audio interface. We call this a UB-MADI. That means we can connect a USB cable directly from our computer at front of house to our console, and we can multi-track record directly from this interface, up to 48 channels, and we can also play back up to 48 channels as well. Lastly, we have an AES pair of in and outs. That means we have 2 channels in and 2 channels out via AES right on board. Now, back to those DMI slots for a second. We have an amazing assortment of cards that go in there. Anything from standard analog and mic pre, line in, line out AES cards. We also have things like MADI over Cat5, MADI B and C. We have Waves, we have Dante, we have Avion, Allen Heath, we have a Clang card. Basically, any format that you could want to talk to, these consoles and these card slots can do it. All right, so let's build up our system with the S31. So we're going to put this S31 in front of house, and we're going to put in a Dante DMI card into one of those card slots on the back. Then we're going to add 2 of the A168 stage boxes. So these actually go in wall, and they're meant to be installed in your facility, in the wall. They actually combine a wall plate and a stage box into one. They mount in standard back boxes, and the power can be hardwired. Now, the cool part about these boxes, not only are they in wall, they also have dynamic LCD labels. So that means that as you route and patch things throughout Dante, those labels are actually going to show up on the LCD boxes themselves. So if your volunteer has any questions about where to plug in a guitar or a vocal, it'll actually say it right there on the box. So this is incredible and a very powerful box. Each of these boxes has 16 inputs and 4 outputs. So with these 2 boxes that we have here, maybe mounted on stage left and stage right walls, this would give us 32 inputs and 8 outputs. Everything, as you can see, is connected to a Dante-enabled switch or a Dante-compatible gigabit switch back to the console. And we have audio going in both directions. We patch everything and set it up in Dante controller, and we're good to go. Now, as your facility grows, we might want to actually add another one of these boxes. And you might not do this after the fact. You may want a portable solution. I'll show you that in a minute. But here we actually have another in-wall box. And it's really as simple as this. We just connect everything back to the existing switch, and we can continue scaling up from there. This would give us 48 inputs and 24 outputs. All right, maybe you have existing wireless microphones already. These can simply be plugged into the mic pre's on the back of the console if they're already at front of house. If they're at the stage, you can plug them into stage boxes, or if they're Dante enabled, we can bring them to the same switch. So maybe as you upgrade your wireless microphones, these things can reside in a rack mount enclosure, connect to the same switch, and be routed through Dante software back to this console. Everything can be controlled through there. Now, as I mentioned before, if you want a portable solution, we can do the same thing with the A168 Dante-enabled stage rack. This is a true 16 by 8 throw-down rack. It doesn't have the cool LCD labels, but it's got the great audio quality and the portability to go with it. If you need a more traditional installed rack mount solution, we have rack mount kits for those boxes as well. All right. Let's take a look at system number 2. This is actually going to be based on DiGiCo's SD series platform, and the infrastructure is going to be MADI. If you're not familiar with MADI, MADI is a point-to-point system. It's not designed to be a network or a star like Dante is. It's designed to go from one device to the next, and it's designed to be incredibly easy. In fact, there is no software for it. You simply connect them together and they work. It truly is that easy. That's why we like it a lot for a lot of our portable and touring systems, as well as just a very basic install system. You're going to see here, though, that we can actually scale this system up to quite a lot as well. All right. So MADI is also sent over coaxial cables. Typically, it does have an option for fiber, but typically coaxial cable, and it's going to give you about 64 channels at 48K. Now, to introduce this system to you, I'm going to need to introduce the SD12. The SD12 is a large format mixing console. It's 96 inputs. It has 48 output buses, 24x2 motorized touch-sensitive faders, RGB backlit encoders, as we mentioned before, and then 5x5 macros. What that means is there are physical buttons for our macros this time with LCD scribble strips, but that means we have 5 banks of 5, so a total of 25 macros. Remember, those can do anything from save your session, tap tempo, update a snapshot, or mute specific inputs if you need them. All right, let's take a look at the back of the console as before to show you how audio gets in and out from here. First things first, we have our 8 mic line inputs, 8 analog line outputs, and 8 channels of AES in and out over 4 pairs in and 4 pairs out of AES. We also have 2 MADI ports. Each of these MADI ports are 64x64 channels at 48K, and we have 2 of them, which you're going to see. We're going to use these in a minute to connect to our stage racks. We also have 2 DiGiCo multi-channel interface card slots. So as before, 64x64 channels at 48 or 96K. We also have a USB audio interface, the UB MADI as before. So that's 48 channels by 48 channels at 48K. And then we have 2 optional optocore loops. So the first one is pretty standard on the SD12, but it is an option. So you can either choose to get it or not. And it depends on your infrastructure. In fact, everything within the SD series line can have optocore added to it. You're going to see an optocore in a minute. I'm going to explain that in system number 3. It is a fiber-based loop system, and this SD12 or any of the SD series could be part of that system. All right, so let's build up our system. We have an SD12 at front of house, and we have a D2 rack that is connected via 2 MADI cables. These are SDI lines or RG59 or RG6. Your video guys are used to these, and they just run 1 send and 1 return from the console MADI port to the D2 rack. The D2 rack is 48 inputs, 16 outputs, and has 2 output option card slots. These give you, can be AES, analog, or Aviom, depending upon what your needs are. Now, as your system grows, we can simply add another rack to this. So 2 more lines, send and return from front of house on that second MADI port back to this console. So now we have 96 total inputs on the stage. We still have our local inputs and outputs with the SD12. All right, now, I told you this was point to point, and we want to add a broadcast console. So let's throw in another SD12. Now we simply take a split off of the D2 rack, and we're taking 1 coax line from each of the D2 racks directly to the 2 MADI ports on the SD12. Now this doesn't actually have to be an SD12. This could be something like an SD9, anything else in our SD range or the quantum range, or even that S31 I was showing you before could have a MADI card put in, and we could connect to these stage boxes as well. Right now, you're probably, as you're growing, going to need to move the musicians on the stage to some form of personal monitoring mixing system. Now, we can do that with something like a Klang DMI card. Remember, this console has those slots on it. So Klang is a personal monitor mixing system that has 16 mixes, 64 inputs, and not only provides the standard mono or stereo option, it provides an amazing immersive 3D mixing option for the musicians as well. Incredibly intuitive interface, iPad, iPhone, tablets, however you want to get in and out of that system and control it, you can. There's actually physical controllers coming for that later this year. Now, if you have an existing Allen Heath mixing system, like the ME1 or the ME500, you can connect those up via ME card. There's also an Aviom card, or if you're just using some other manufacturer, they probably have Dante, and we can just stick a Dante card in there as well. All right, so let's talk about system number 3. This is based around DiGiCo's Quantum series platform and optocore as infrastructure. So Quantum series is our flagship series of consoles. We have the Quantum 7, the Quantum 5, and the Quantum 338. The Quantum 338 was just introduced at NAMM earlier this year. We've had installed quite a few of these across the US already at various churches. Let's talk about optocore though first. Opticore is a fiber loop-based system, as I mentioned before. Now, Opticore is pretty cool because in a loop, you go from one device, connect to the next device, to connect to the next, connect to the next, connect to the next, and back to the first. And then if you need to add a device, you simply break a connection, add a device, and connect those back together. So you can scale the system up very easily just by connecting things into the loop. So it is a redundant loop. That is the other thing that makes this awesome. And that's why we fully complete it, because it sends audio not only in the primary direction, but in a redundant direction simultaneously. And then the software on the Opticore cards will choose which ring it's actually taking. So if a console gets turned off or disconnected, then audio and control will still flow completely around the ring and around that disconnected device. It allows for 5 consoles, each with redundant engines, and it allows for 14 I/O racks. This is amazing. That's a lot of I/O that you can scale up to. Remember though, most people start with 1 or 2 devices and then scale it from there as you need it later on. So these I/O devices can be like our SD rack, which I'm going to show you in a minute, the mini or the nano version of that SD rack. There is a D rack, there's an orange box, there's Opticore R series boxes. All of those can reside on the same network. Now, this network allows for a total of 504 audio channels at 48 or 96K. That is one of the primary reasons people look at this solution. It is difficult usually to move around 96K with a significant number of audio channels. And this platform has no penalty for doing so. All right, let's dive in and introduce you to the Quantum 338. The Quantum 338 has 128 inputs, it has 64 output buses, and it provides 64 channels of nodal processing. Nodal processing is something exclusive to the Quantum, and what that does is it allows you to have full EQ 4-band parametric with dynamic control, so dynamic EQ. It allows you to have a compressor and a gates or any combination of Dynamics 1 and Dynamics 2 applied to a specific node, aux node of a specific channel. What this means is instead of double patching channels, maybe you have a lead worship or lead vocal worship leader channel, and you might have a channel for their ears. You might also have a channel for the house. And instead of having to double patch those and run 2 channels, most people are only doing this if they have the channels available. You can actually do all this from a single channel. So I set up one channel that's going to my house, and then I can choose that nodal processing and turn on a specific EQ and dynamics, or maybe no dynamics, more importantly, to go to that worship leader's ears. All right, we also have 36x2 motorized touch-sensitive faders. We have RGB backlit encoders. We have 10 macro LCD buttons by 4 banks, so a total of 40 macro LCD buttons. And then we have capacitive multi-touch, daylight viewable, high-res displays. And these screens are big and beautiful and clear and very easy to navigate around on as well. All right, as before, let me show you the back of the console so you can see how audio gets in and out of here. Now, first things first, we have our onboard local I/O, 8 mic pre's, 8 line outs, and 8 channels of AS in and out. Now, the analog I/O on here is very special. It's actually our 32-bit mic pre's. These are premium Stadius pre's, and they are built into this surface. It is exceptional how low noise and how high detailed these mic pre's can be. All right, next you have our 6 MADI ports. Each of these MADI ports is 64 by 64 channels at 48K. Then we have our UB MADI interface. So this is the same USB audio interface I showed you before. We have 2 DMI card slots, and then we have a dedicated Waves I/O port on here. This is 64 channels of Waves at 96K. You also have Opticore as standard on the Quantum series, and then you have Opticore, a second Opticore optional loop. That means if everything I told you about Opticore was not enough, you can do this times 2. All right, last we have fully redundant power supplies. We have this on the entire Quantum range and the SD range as well. That means you only need 1 power supply to operate. The second one is fully redundant, and that can be either or. We recommend putting 1 on a UPS. So if you do have a brownout or you have some sort of power issue at the facility, you'll have seamless running of your console. All right, let's build up our system. We're going to start by putting a Quantum 338 at front of house, and then we're going to add a Quantum 338 at broadcast. So once again, these don't have to be the same console. I'm just doing this for ease of PowerPoint building, but this could be a SD console. This could be a Quantum console. It really doesn't matter. Put what you need where you need it. Now we're going to add 2 of our SD racks. These are our premium modular racks. These have 7 input card slots, 7 output card slots with 8 inputs or 8 outputs per card slot. So it means we can have 56 in, 56 out per rack, The two we have here would give us 112 inputs on the stage, plus we would always have our local inputs and outputs available to us whenever we needed it. All right, next we're going to connect these all up via a fiber loop or a fiber ring, as we talked about before. This means we're going to take fiber between device to device to device back to the first. That'll give us a redundant loop. Next thing we're going to add is something I haven't introduced you to yet. This is called a 4x4 system. The 4x4 system is essentially 4 small digital audio consoles crammed into a centralized DSP housing. So it has some audio I/O on it, but it's actually meant to have remote I/O and remote control as well. And I'm going to show you that now. What we can use this solution for is actually being a standalone centralized mixer for multiple smaller venues across your campus. So let's stick some I/O across our campus. We have our A164 Dante-enabled wall LCD boxes. We have our A168 Dante-enabled stage box, and we have some Dante wireless microphones. Those are all connected up to Dante via Dante DMI card into the 4x4 system. Now, we can have an opticore DMI card as well in that 4x4, so it can ride on the same network. That means I could take Dante from those wireless microphones, I could put it onto the opticore network, and then those front of house and broadcast consoles could not only see any of those I/O boxes that are connected via Dante, but they could see the stage inputs as well. In fact, they'd have all of them available to them. Next, let's add some controllers. You're going to see me put a controller in things like your fellowship hall, your chapel, your children's room, and some in-wall encoders for the lobby volume control as well. You can also have Mac or PC control, and you can have iPad control as well. All of these controllers can be set up to show you just the channels, the mixes, the auxes that you want the operator to see. They're also PoE powered. So we can connect them to PoE switches, and we can just simply plug them in when we need control, maybe part of a portable cart or in-wall solution. All right, finally, let's add a monitor mixing console to this loop. So once again, remember, we can add more I/O, we can add more consoles simply by breaking the loop, adding in the device that we need. And now we have 3 consoles, front of house, monitors, and broadcast, all in the same loop, getting to see all of this same I/O, as well as send audio back down the loop as well. All right, that's basically it for us. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ryan Shelton.
All right. Joining me now, the man himself, Ryan Shelton. Ryan is the National Sales Manager for Professional Audio Products for Group 1 Limited. Group 1 is the company that distributes DiGiCo here in the US. Ryan, welcome. How's it going this morning?
Hey, it's going well, Aaron. Thanks for having me today.
Of course. So let's start right off with, we just had a presentation from Waves this morning. I know that Waves integration with DiGiCo is pretty tight. So I wonder if you can just talk about that for a quick moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to, it was probably 2008 or 2009, we had Waves actually running multi-rack, which was the predecessor to Super Rack, actually running on our consoles. They made a custom version for us, and we did that for a number of years. As multi-rack would just grow and they kept adding features and kind of demands on it. We actually ended up moving it out, but we retained a lot of the same integration. So you can, if you have Super Rack or multi-rack paired up with your DiGiCo SD or Quantum console, you can load a single session on your console and have it load the same session on your Waves Super Rack. You can save and create snapshots from your console, and it will do all of that automatically. And as Jeremiah mentioned earlier, there's a touch and turn function where I can select a specific parameter on multi-rack or Super Rack, and I can go to my physical encoder and buttons that I have on my console and control it from there. So it really just acts like a seamless extension to your DiGiCo platform.
That's awesome. Speaking of tight integration, I know you touched briefly on the Clang IEM system in your presentation there. I know that Clang is still, a pretty recent addition to the DiGiCo family of products. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about Clang, tell us what we mean by immersive IEM mixing, and how that all works on DiGiCo consoles.
Sure. Clang was purchased by DiGiCo in late 2018, actually December, so it's been right over 2 years now. But they provide a personal monitor mixing system that is based on tablets or phones or Amazon Fire tablets, kind of whatever you want to do. And it actually puts those controls into the user's hands, but it's a personal monitor mixing system, just like any other. But its big kind of special feature is that it provides immersive audio mixing or processing for the musician. And so the idea here is that a musician can have a fully immersive mix. And before you go thinking that this is something like VR or AR or some sort of augmented reality, the whole idea is actually just to replicate what a musician would have on stage if they just pulled out their ears and were actually playing with their band. So to have a couple wedges on stage, you have the drummer behind you, you have the bass player kind of behind you and to your left, you have things like that kind of surrounding you. Your brain just does the localization it would do, and it's been doing your whole life. And we're just trying to bring that processing to your stereo ears. It's amazing how natural it is, and really it's something to check out. In fact, if you want to, go to clang.com or go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the app, plug in some headphones, and you can actually try this out on your device. They have demo tracks included, and you can steer things around your head, above and below you. It's really cool.
Yeah, that sounds great. Everybody should absolutely check that out. I've played around with it a little bit myself in the past. It is a really cool feature. Finally, I know that there has been a recent software update, and as you highlighted in your presentation, DiGiCo is always kind of pushing the envelope, pushing the lifespan really of your consoles with these software updates. So can you give us just a quick overview of what the most recent update brings?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is an update for the S series and there's an update for the SD and Quantum series. So the one I'll talk about right now is geared towards the SD and the Quantum series, and that's version 1280. So it's actually the same software that's going to run on Quantum consoles or on SD series consoles. You're going to have additional features on the Quantum consoles, but it's the same software platform. So I could take a session from an SD 12 and move it to a Quantum 7 or whatever you need to do. It's available for all SD consoles and all Quantum consoles. It's a free update. You're going to have it on the website. So you can just go to the DiGiCo website, look under the support section, and there's a downloads there. You can download it for your particular console. And included in that is what we call release notes. Everybody does this or a version of this, but it's going to give you in depth what everything is, all the updates. And there are an absolute ton of user requested features in this one. We kind of took this opportunity with kind of a lack of demand for touring and really people using consoles every single day. And they really just took the time the developers did to just go through this list and knock out as many as possible. So it's a huge update. Just to highlight a few, you have Dante control for SD12 and Quantum consoles, so you can connect those same Dante racks we were talking about in the presentation. You can do a reordering of channels within your session. So this is not just physically on the surface. This is physically taking channel 82 and moving it to channel number 2. All the snapshot data, all the automation, everything included will move with that. There's also a ton of options for the user around tap tempos, things like aux node safes. I mean, there's just a huge list of this. So in our sessions later today, if any of you DiGiCo users have questions about this, this is one of those things that we would be happy to go through you with in detail and just explain some of these new features and what they offer you.
Awesome. So yeah, DiGiCo users here in the chat, make sure you're checking out that new update. Now I think we're going to move along to our giveaway items. We have a couple of really cool kind of tech bags. You can use them to organize cables, organize devices, whatever you might need that DiGiCo has provided for us. I do have the 2 winners. We have 2 of those bags. So first we have Pete Merriweather from Chicago here. And we also have Dallas Johnson, who is joining us from West Lafayette, Indiana. So congratulations to both of you. We will be reaching out via the email that you used to sign up for the event. So keep an eye on that, and we'll be reaching out to get these delivered to you. All right. So Ryan, I understand that we're going to have your colleague Kyle joining us for the Q&A sessions later today.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle is our head of education and training, and he's been a DiGiCo user for, I don't even know how long. It's well over a decade. And he'll be joining us to offer experience in his expertise. So if anybody is kind of new to DiGiCo or has questions about DiGiCo, Kyle will be able to just give a touring engineer's perspective on that as well.
All right, that sounds great. So everyone, make sure you're signing up for those Q&A sessions happening later today, starting at 1 p.m. Central. That's at digitalconsoleexpo.com. So thank you very much, Ryan, and thank you, Kyle. We'll be talking to you a little bit later. So I hope you guys enjoy the brief break we have, and then we'll be seeing you a little bit later today.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks once again to everyone who's joining us today. Remember to sign up for those Q&A sessions. Also remember, we do have one more deep dive session happening at 5 p.m. Central Time with Allen and Heath going over the SQ series. Again, that's at digitalconsoleexpo.com to register. And finally, a reminder that we are recording these webinars, these main sessions, as well as the deep dive sessions, and those will be posted to our YouTube channel within the next couple days. So keep an eye out for that. And with that, I'm going to throw it back to Brian at the TC Furlong Inc. headquarters.
Thanks, Aaron. And a big thank you to Waves and DiGiCo for their presentations today. And a thank you to all our manufacturers for presenting in this year's expo, Allen Heath, Yamaha, Avid, Lawo, and SSL. So make sure you're signing up for those breakout Q&A sessions with Waves and DiGiCo this afternoon. We do have some space still available. Again, sign up at the digitalconsoleexpo.com website. And also make sure you check out that Allen and Heath SQ series webinar later today. So a big thank you to everyone on the TC Furlong production team for helping put this together. Matt, Steve, Scott, and AJ. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you to Aaron as well for helping host this year's event. And a big shout out to everyone on the TC Furlong team. Again, it was a team effort. Make sure you stay in touch with us and by signing up for our mailing list on the tcfurlong.com website. We've got a lot of great events lined up here in the future, including a future webinar with Studio Technologies scheduled for January 21st. So a last reminder, this is not the end of the Digital Console Expo. We still have our breakout sessions and our deep dive webinar later today. So make sure you tune in for some more great Digital Console Expo content there. But thanks again for attending, and we'll see you later in the breakouts.